through the blessed life of the master of the ladies of the universe, Lady Fatima Zahra, the beloved daughter of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where we're going to learn about her life, her contribution, her sacrifice, and her legacy. So please, let's meet every night throughout the holy month of Ramadan and learn from the beautiful life of Lady Fatima alayhi salam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. May the peace and the gifts and the blessings of the Lord be with you and upon you, my dear brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this session we discuss Fatima's knowledge and Fatima's learning. And we know that Fatima Zahra alayhi salam was the very first female student of the Prophet. And she used to be around her father most of the times, whether she was in Mecca or when they moved to Medina. Whenever Jibreel arrives, Fatima is there. She would see her father receiving the revelation. And the father would sit with his daughter and with Ali. And remember, Ali came into the life of the Prophet since the age of 6, way before he became the Prophet's sons-in-law. So both of them, at a very young age, they would sit with the Prophet, and the Prophet explains the meanings of the Quran. And the meanings of the Quran, my friends, contains the entire knowledge of Islam, the entire knowledge of the previous scriptures too. God says about the Quran, فِيهِ تِبْيَانٌ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. There is an explanation, elaboration about everything. So once a student learns the Quran from the teacher of the Quran, from Prophet Muhammad himself, who God sent him لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهِمْ. He is the source of teaching. He received the Quran and he was endowed with the responsibility of passing the knowledge of the Quran to his ummah, to mankind. And imagine those two students sitting with the Prophet. Now, when someone teaches Quran today, a mufassir, even a scholar, an exegist, not everything he says could necessarily be true. Some of what he says could be predictions. But when the Prophet teaches the Quran, وَمَا يَنطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ, because God had taught him the true meanings of these verses. There are no more assumptions, no more predictions. إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا جَمْعَهُ وَقُرْآنَهُ فَإِذَا قَرَأْنَاهُ فَاتَّبِعْ قُرْآنَهُ ثُمَّ إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا بَيَانَهُ. It's upon us to explain the Quran to the people through you, Ya Rasulullah. So God receives the Quran itself, the text itself, plus the interpretation of that text, both from God. Revelation and the explanation of the details of that revelation, both comes from God. ثُمَّ إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا بَيَانَهُ. So there are no more assumptions. Everything the Prophet says is true. These are facts, and these facts were presented to Ali and Fatima. They are in the same house and the same room with the Prophet, peace be upon him. So she was the very first female student, and Ali was the first to receive the knowledge of the Quran. And Imam Ali says in many of his declarations that I am the most knowledgeable among you about the Quran, and I know the details about every verse. When did it arrive? How did it arrive? In where did it arrive? In what location? In what time of the day or the night? And what was it about? Ali ma'a al-Quran wal-Quranu ma'a Ali. The Prophet says, this man is with this book, the Holy Quran, and this book, the Holy Quran, is with him, with Ali. So those were the students of the Prophet. And those two students, the male and the female, Ali and Fatima, were compatible, intellectually compatible. Now, in this society, we find some people who are financially compatible. They both come from wealthy families. Sometimes we find some people who are socially compatible. They could be cousins from the same tribe, same family, same social status. Sometimes they come from similar background. Both of them work in Hollywood. Both of them work in Wall Street. Both of them work in educational field. Both of them are professors. But then when you have intellectual and moral compatibility and matching, this is important. And this is very rare. It's very rare to find people who are morally and intellectually compatible to each other. Very rare. Ali and Fatima were compatible, and this is why the Prophet said the only kuf, the only matching, real matching to Fatima was Ali. Not because of the blood, because Fatima had many other cousins, but because of the brain, because of reason, because of the soul, because of the mind, the aql, and because of the culture, and because of education. And therefore, they enjoyed their life because they related to each other. In some instances, in some families, the husband and the wife do not relate to each other because there is no intellectual compatibility between them. One of them is higher than the other. And that causes a lot of a problem. If the wife is higher than her husband in her brain, in her intelligence, in her education, in her knowledge, in her love to learn, then that would cause a problem. If the husband is higher than his wife in these things, then it will cause some conflict at home because they don't relate to each other. And oftentimes they argue because they don't understand each other. They are not on the same frequency. Therefore, it is very important for the husband and the wife to learn, both of them. Maybe in the old days, the wife was considered to be a housewife. She has nothing to do with education. She has nothing to do with teaching her kids because the kids will go to an external teacher outside the house, muallim, or as they used to be called in the old days, kuttab or katib, who teaches them how to read and write and teaches them the Holy Quran. So she was considered to be a mere servant. She is there just for cleaning and cooking and answering her husband's needs. But nowadays it's different, my friends. It's different. And it really makes a big difference if they are compatible, if they are on the same page, not just socially or financially or physically, but on the same page intellectually and morally. Nowadays, most people think of being on the same page as far as race is concerned. So if he's white, he wants a white lady. If she's a black, she's looking for a black man. But race, color, even money would not be a great issue. It might be an issue, but not something of a big concern. What is really needed today is spiritual, moral, and intellectual compatibility and matching. These things are important. These things make real difference. And therefore, Fatima alayhi salam was keen to learn from her father. And she would gather that in a book, and I will speak about this book in another episode, inshallah. She would put it down on paper. Not only that, she would also, when she hears something from her husband, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam, again she would write it down. Sometimes she sends her kids, Hassan and Hussein, to the mosque. They listen to the Prophet there. They come back, فَتَسْتَنْطِقُهُمَا. She would question them. What did your grandfather say today? What did you hear from him? Imagine two kids coming back home telling their mother the story that they heard in the mosque. The hadith, the narrations, the knowledge of their grandfather, the Prophet. She was very keen on learning. She seized the opportunity, every opportunity. And the Prophet at home was a teacher, my friends. Everything he says had a meaning. Now, many of us, the fathers, sometimes we say things that is meaningless or doesn't make sense or it doesn't help or it doesn't benefit. But the Prophet wasn't like that. The Prophet, his speech, his public as well as private, his comments, his feedback, everything that he uttered had a meaning. Now, it doesn't have to be sunnah. Everything is part of the sharia, part of halal and haram. But it was worthy of learning and benefiting from it. Because the Prophet never spoke nonsense, never ever in his life. Never before his mission, nor after he became a prophet and he was ordained. He always spoke the truth, and he always eschewed قول الزور. God says, فاجتنبوا قول الزور. He would not. قول الزور means when you speak something nonsense, really. When you speak something not reasonable, not accepted. The Prophet never did that. So every sentence, everything he says, it turns into a sentence. It turns into writing with Fatima alayhi salam. And then the Prophet himself was keen on teaching his daughter. Now some fathers, they are too busy to turn to their families. The Prophet was not like that. The Prophet himself was too busy, but yet he knows that Fatima is going to be a mentor, is going to be a teacher, is going to be a guide. So he has to pass this knowledge to Fatima. One day, the Prophet finds Fatima not being okay for some reasons. She was under the weather. She's a mother. She has a big responsibility. Medina was under threat. The society was suffering. The society was growing. There were many challenges. There were many enemies to murder the Prophet, to destroy this newly born society. So the Prophet said to her, get a palm leaf and write these things on it. وَتَعَلَّمِ مَا فِيهَا, and learn. Reflect on what I'm going to tell you. تَعَلَّمِ. Reflection. Sometimes we read, but that does not mean this is reflection. But sometimes you read a passage and you reflect. Reflecting. You digest what you are reading. This is important. This is what we should do with this book, the Holy Quran. We should read and reflect. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Tadabbur is reflection. Reflection into the deep meanings of these verses. So the Prophet asked her to reflect on this. Because when you go deep, my friends, into knowledge, into learning, into these treasures, Ulum Ali Muhammad, you would forget your other problems, the material problems. Try this. When you are overwhelmed, when you are overstressed with bad thoughts, when you have anxiety about something, try to get a good book. Book of hadith, book of akhlaq, book of good stories. The Holy Quran itself. You find everything in the Holy Quran. But we the people like me, we need to have tafsir. We need to have book of tafsirs with this Quran, so we can enjoy it. We can understand the deep meaning of it. Once you start reading, you forget about as if you have no problems. So the Prophet wanted to say to Fatima, Ya Fatima, I know the burdensome task that you have upon you, upon your shoulders. But ta'allami ma fiha, when you reflect on what I am giving you, when you reflect on the bigger picture, on the bigger responsibility, on the more important responsibilities in this life, on the bigger mission on this life, you are going to forget about the small tasks. You are going to forget about your pain. And this is true. Try it and see it for yourself. My friends, sometimes you have pain, you have suffering, you have worries, but you watch a good movie. While you are watching that movie for 2 hours, you forget your pain. Once the movie is over, you go back to reality, you remember your pain. The Prophet was telling his daughter that once you delve deep into this knowledge, you're going to forget the external pain that you have. And therefore Fatima would learn, and she would pass this knowledge to the women of Muhajirin and Ansar, the immigrants who came from Mecca, and Ansar, the helpers who were already in Medina. And she used to have a halaqah for them. Halaqah is the Islamic name of the circle, of the group who sit together with their teacher and they reflect and they study. So she used to have halaqas with her student. The vast majority of them were females. Nevertheless, sometimes men would come and ask Fatima. When we read the ahadith, some of the narrations, we realize that sometimes a man comes to the house of Fatima asking her, sometimes asking for food, sometimes for money, sometimes for knowledge. In one of the stories, a man came and he knocked at the door of Fatima and he said to her, هل لك شيء تطرفينيه يا ابنة رسول الله? Do you have something good you give to me? Because knowledge is gift, my friends. Gift is not only a bouquet of flowers or perfume or a box of chocolate. Sometimes it could be bigger than that, bigger than these material objects. It could be knowledge. I love when someone presents me with a book. It's knowledge. Stays with you. Though the chocolate is delicious, the perfume is wonderful, the flowers are blossoming, and they are very much needed, but when someone gives you knowledge, the knowledge stays with you, and you can pass it to others. So he came and he asked for knowledge. Someone that you heard from your father, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She said, yes, of course. And he was a man. She was inside the house. He's outside standing. So she said, Ya Fidda, bring me this palm leaf that I kept. Fidda one, she didn't find it. Fatima said, you have to bring it. فَإِنَّهَا تَعْدِلُ عِنْدِي حَسَنًا وَحُسَيْنًا. Wow, this is a metaphor. Fatima loves Hassan and Hussein, but yet she says this palm leaf is equal to Hassan and Hussein. Why she's saying that? This is a metaphor. It means this is knowledge. This is the legacy. فَإِنَّهَا تُرَاثُ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. This is the legacy of the Prophet. This is the intellectual and moral and spiritual legacy of the Prophet. You have to take care of it. Bring it to me. Not only the palm leaf could not have a value, but what is in it, the spirit of that knowledge. The spirit of that knowledge. You know, sometimes, my friends, we buy these books for $5 a piece. $5. But the knowledge inside it, it's worth billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. You are just paying for the paper, for the ink. You are not paying for the knowledge. You are not paying for the science inside, or the ilm, the treasures. This is why Fatima said this palm leaf is important. Important to me. It's like Hassan and Hussein. So she found it. And what was in that one? She opened it. من كان يؤمن بالله. First of all, ليس من المؤمنين. He's not among the community of the believers. من لم يأمن جاره بوائقه. A person that his neighbor is not immune from his annoying, from his hurt, then he's not a believer. Means that do not annoy your neighbor. Be nice to your neighbor. So when you are asked, when your neighbor is asked about you, he says, I have a good man next door, good family next door. وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلَا يُؤْذِي جَارَهُ. When you don't hurt your neighbor, you are not hurting your community. You are not hurting anyone. وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. Whoever believes in God and the Day of Judgment, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَسْكُتْ. Either say good, or if you can't say good, you can't afford, then don't say anything. Don't hurt people. If we just reflect on this last piece, either we say good. If we have something good to say, to write, to text, then we must do it. If not, then we refrain from writing, texting, speaking, commenting. We don't say. We keep the society clean and strong. Because the hadith says most of the problems that are created in this life comes from the human tongues, from our tongues. Luqman sent his son with a sheep. He said, bring me بألذ مضغتين فيها. bring me two most delicious organ pieces in this sheep. So he slaughtered the sheep. He brought the tongue and the heart. He gave him another sheep. He said, Atini bi'akhbathi mudghatayn fiha. Bring me the most wicked limbs or organs or pieces of this sheep. So he went, he slaughtered the sheep. He came back with the same, with the heart and the tongue. So the father said, they are the same. He said, yes. ليس بألذ منهما إذا طابا ولا بأخبث منهما إذا خبث. Nothing is more beautiful and delicious than the heart and the tongue if they are good. And nothing is more wicked and evil than the heart and the tongue when they turn evil. This is the knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ passed to Fatima alayhi salam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.